Today we're diving into a fascinating demographic shift that's reshaping Australia more quietly than population growth or migration, but with far bigger long-term consequences. By 2029, and that's not long away now, every baby boomer will officially be at retirement age. But as you're going to hear today, many just won't be anywhere near ready to down tools. And not just because their super balance or their money isn't enough. Some boomers are working because they enjoy it. Some because their jobs have changed. They no longer get worn out at the age of 60 like their parents were. Others simply because they don't have a choice, especially those who are in lower paid or physically tough jobs. And on the flip side, some are reinventing retirement entirely, scaling back, contracting, taking intermittent sabbaticals, or using work as a way to fund the lifestyle they want. So welcome to this week's episode of Demographics Decoded, the show that unveils the trends shaping your future. Hi, I'm Michael Yardney, and each week I'm joined by leading demographer Simon Kirstenmacher, and together we dig beneath the data to uncover the trends that are shaping our economies, our communities, and the future prosperity of Australia and you, and what that means for your business, your investments, and your future prosperity. And of course, our aim is to help make sense of what's coming next so you can make smarter decisions for your business, your investments, and your life. So, Simon, today I'd like to paint with you a story of a country where the future retirement is being rewritten as we live it in real time.
Yes, it is. And we constantly need to rethink our stereotypes, if you will, about retirement, about when we retire, who retires, and what we do in retirement.
Now, this is based on articles that you've written and things we've spoken about before, but it seems like from what I've been reading, you've got something against the idea of retirement. Every time you're writing the topic, boomers seem to lose another 5 years of leisure. They keep working.
That's it. It's my secret ploy is to ensure that baby boomers work longer. First and foremost, this would, of course, drive more money into the public coffers through tax. It would minimize things like unhappiness, because if you choose to work longer, if this is not out of pure economic hardship, we do know that your mental health improves. We know that your mental decline slows quite significantly if you stay active and healthy. Work in that sense doesn't need to be work. It could be volunteering work as well, but you need to be hyper active in retirement. That makes for the best mental health related retirement. Yeah, but so that's my ploy. I want to take away from retirement.
Well, even though we're going to talk a lot about baby boomers today, even if you're not a baby boomer, I think it's going to be really important for you if you're an investor to understand the trends of what's going to happen on the stock markets and how people spend, because the big businesses of Australia are on the stock market. If you're a property investor, to understand the trends that are there. And if you're a small business yourself or a professional. So this show isn't just for baby boomers, and you may well have parents or friends who are boomers as well. So let's put it in context. By 2029, well, baby boomers will be officially of what we used to call retirement age, but over 500,000 of them will still be working. What does all that mean? What is retirement age?
Well, so retirement age, traditionally speaking, we just make it very simple for ourselves. Demographers, we say 65 is retirement age. That makes working age, whenever you start your careers until 64, that is roughly what we understand as working age. And then retirement age is anything 65 and older. But we now see, of course, more and more people move working into retirement age. 5% of the whole workforce is 65 and older right now in Australia. Most of these 5% are, of course, 65 and 66-year-olds. Then there is still a steep drop-off. But this drop-off will become less and less steep as more people continue to work into old age. Why do we know this to be the case? Well, an ever larger share of the population is working in what we consider knowledge jobs where you use your brain, where you sit, where you work with a computer, these kind of jobs. And it is, of course, much easier to be a accountant into your 60s and 70s than to lay bricks into your 70s. And as we rejig the economy away from industrialized or back then, farming societies into a service-based economy, more people can work into retirement age just physically. We don't even worry about money and preferences and what's good for your mental health. We don't care about any of this. It is just much more possible, and therefore more people will do it.
Well, I'm a baby boomer and I'm still working in my early 70s, but I think in the old days, People waited for retirement. They saw it as a reward. Nowadays, Simon, I'm getting the sense that people see it as a downgrade.
To a degree, it is, and for many baby boomer men in particular, it will be. So a downgrade, it could be in your role in society. The idea is if you created over many years in your working life quite an important work persona where you climbed the career ladder, you're at the top of your game. Maybe you created some sort of public profile, even if this is in a small pond, so to speak, but you are big in your small pond. That's cool. You enjoy this. You enjoy the fruits of your labor. You enjoy the status, the acknowledgement, and so forth, maybe the influence that you have within this role. And then you retire, and all of a sudden, all of this is taken away from you. That is quite a shock to the system. And so people don't like it. And people say, well, how about I still get the best of both worlds? How about I scale back my working hours in favor of still, well, I have more spare time, but I still draw an income of sorts, and I still retain my status, which is very, very important to me. And the status equation at the moment, because we're retiring baby boomers, where still men have a significantly higher workforce participation rate than women. This will be hitting men in particular who say, boy, the idea of actually retiring seems like a downgrade of my status. And so they don't want that. Also, of course, retirement in the retirement word, the brand of retirement in the head of a baby boomer still feels like old age,
Yes.
unproductive, and boomers do not view themselves like this at all. So they will try their best to move away from this. This is one of the reasons why we don't call retirement living facilities retirement villages. We call them 55 plus communities or something like this. We try to avoid the R word when talking to baby boomers like crazy.
Well, it's definitely a dirty word amongst baby boomers. I agree with that. Having said that, are we maybe seeing a trend around the world where retirement age is quietly shifting upwards without anything officially happening? I guess it was sort of official because that's when you could get the pension in the past,
Yeah.
Simon.
Of course. And when you think about when we introduced a pension, we introduced a pension at 65 at a time when people didn't live until 65 on average. So it was very, very easy to finance this pension scheme, so to speak. But yeah, so it was the idea is you work extremely hard with your body. You put your body on the line. And then you literally cannot work anymore. And so we allow you to live out your last few remaining years in peace, quiet, and dignity. And that's the reward for your hard labor.
Now, a lot of the younger people may not understand that baby boomers don't have anywhere near as much super balance as others would think because we didn't have compulsory superannuation before, and living off the pension isn't really fun. Maggi noodles don't taste very good in retirement.
No, they don't. And of course, yeah, that is true. So the idea of the super was introduced in the early 90s. So it will take until the mid 2030s until somebody retires who paid into super for their whole working life. So that is still a decade out. And so now the boomers that are retiring today, they have quite a bit of money because they only spent the first low income years of their career without compulsory super payments. Then, of course, they missed out on 10 years worth of growth, accumulating growth on their investments. That's fine. But overall, it gets better now for the people that are retiring now. But yes, if you look at a baby boomer that retired 5, 6, 10 years ago, their super balance would have been much lower. Good thing is that some of them are asset rich. They have a house that is now worth a lot of money. So many boomers could find a way around this, sell the Sydney property, move to the Gold Coast. That was a decent trade financially that allowed many people to work around this. Yeah, but one of the reasons, of course, why you work past 65 is that your nest egg isn't large enough. And you are too rich for the pension, which is what we still have in place to make sure that if you don't have enough in your super, you don't live in absolute abhorrent poverty. But the pension isn't big at all. So you actually don't want to rely on your pensions. You want to rely on your own savings.
We know a lot of baby boomers own their home, and most of them have actually paid off their home because they bought it years ago. So they've got assets, but they don't have cash flow. Now, I remember the old idea many years ago was, well, when I retire, I will sell my home. I'll trade down to a villa unit, a townhouse, an apartment, and I'll get lots of change and I'll be able to live off that. Those sums don't seem to work today, Simon.
They don't, and it becomes, of course, unattractive to sell the family home with stamp duties in place. That seems scary. Then you have the challenge that the people that would right now be in the downsizing phase tend to live, it's a generalization, but they tend to live in the middle suburbs of our big cities. And they'd go, well, if I sell this thing now, where do I move to? I can't stay in my middle suburb because this is mostly family-sized dwellings available there. There isn't all that much like nice units. Maybe I don't view myself as a person to live into a unit. I would want a small garden of sorts or something. And what do I find there? And then it's just too hard. So I stay here. And of course, psychologically speaking, I think it is very hard to sell a house that constantly accrued value. So you feel like I'm selling this thing now, but I know more growth is coming. So you postpone this. And so you have lots and lots of people that are asset rich and income poor. I know that most listeners to this podcast probably live next to an old Greek or Italian grandmother widow who sits on $1 million plus $2 million property and lives off the pension, lives a very, very poor, humble lifestyle.
Modest.
And you might go, this is bizarre. And you go, well, please, why don't you sell this, move into a 1-bedroom apartment nearby and live like a queen of the difference? But that's probably not even in her psychology at all. So that wouldn't come to her mind ever. And so that won't happen. So we will have more and more relatively income poor people who live very modest lifestyles, but then their kids will cash in on the property value in a couple of years when they die.
Now, I know there are first homeowner grants and there are first homeowner stamp duty savings. I'm going to suggest that we should actually have a last move stamp duty saving because, in fact, if you sold your big house and moved down, there's probably still something like $200,000 lost along the way in stamp duty. And I think we'd probably get more people downsizing. First of all, there's a shortage of the right sort of accommodation, but if you had $200,000 more in your pocket, maybe you could do it more easily. There could well be a system that would allow for that, Simon.
I think there would be. And I think that's what the market would want. So when we talk about overall housing affordability, let's assume we wanted to improve affordability. We would want to improve the mismatch of household to household type, or to housing type. And so the idea would then be to say you are a baby boomer couple, a baby boomer widower, living in a property. What could we offer you to encourage you to downsize? We will never ever force anyone to downsize. We want to live in a society where you have full free choice over your housing decisions and so forth. But maybe we can sweeten the deal for you and encourage you to move down. That would be an attractive deal if we were able to pull it off. That, of course, has a couple of problems. One of those problems is that how would we know that we give this money, these tax cuts, to people that wouldn't have downsized anyways? So I guess you could measure it. You could run this as an experiment for 4 years and then see what happens and then adjust the policy afterwards if it didn't work as you wanted to. So we could do these kind of things. And I think that would be better because we do know that, again, this is mental health data, that people in a walkable community in old age, in a neighborhood that's very friendly towards retaining mobility and social mobility in old age, that this is really good for your mental health in old age. So if we could encourage these types of behaviors, taking people from car-dependent middle suburbs into more walkable areas, this could be a formal retirement village, it could be some other setup, this would have marvelous mental health outcomes.
Now, talking about the unretirement, that baby boomers aren't retiring, I know that we said there's over 500,000 people over 65 currently working, and I know your business partner, Bernard Salt, made some projections in an article in The Australian of 1 million over 65s in the workforce in a few years' time. Simon, are we creating two Australias in retirement, one who people have got choice and others who just have no choice at the moment?
We do. So this is part of the broader story that we touched on in many previous episodes, that society shifts more and more into this U shape where the middle class shrinks in relative size and the poor and the higher income end, they grow. And so therefore, when we talk about retirement, we must always think about those different versions of retirement. There will be more people who will be forced financially to work to extend their working life because they don't have at 65 enough money in their savings to comfortably make the case that the money will last until they die. So they will work longer, and this won't look too annoying for the first couple of years because you're used to it. But then even if you work whatever your job is, if you don't want to work and you wished to retire, you might become resentful and it just becomes too hard on you eventually. And that's difficult. And I think we'll see more people like this in the future. And that's quite dramatic, to be honest.
So what we're really saying, Simon, is that there are more lower skilled jobs, people who had lower skilled jobs who have to keep working. Is that correct?
Guaranteed, absolutely guaranteed. We are far from what Australians would always shake their head off at when they're in the US and they see a cashier or a supermarket bag packer who is in their 80s. This is a common sight in the US, and we are far from this as a mass phenomenon. So that is a positive. But are we moving into that direction? The answer is yes, we are. And so we go, well, how would we counteract that? The idea of introducing super to begin with was good because we ensure that we force people to save money. And we say, well, if you only ever worked on a low income job, you don't have enough money in your super. Yes, the pension is still there. But we want to make sure that the pension is relatively small because otherwise it blows out budgets. The problem, of course, is that the pension kind of needs to pay for something like rent assistance if you are not a property owner in old age. And that becomes costly if we ever increase the share of people that are renters. The pension system doesn't worry about whether a 45-year-old or even a 60-year-old lives in a rented or an owned accommodation, whatever. But once you're in retirement, you want to make sure that this people has their house or their dwelling paid off, because otherwise it is a drain on the system because we need to subsidize your rent. Your pension will never, ever be enough to cover your rent anymore. That's out of the question. So you see how this thing of expensive housing, it really eats into the retirement question significantly as well.
Well, in past episodes of Demographics Decoded, we've spoken about how we've lost the middle class in Australia. We didn't create many of those middle class jobs over the last couple of decades. So it sounds like we're creating two sorts of Australias. I was hinting at one group of retirees, maybe they were knowledge workers, contractors. They're travellers. They're on Instagram. They're on those cruises that you see on TV and sending photos to their grandchildren on Instagram and Facebook. And then there are the other Australians who are still having to work. Did this come from the fact that we lost our middle class?
Yeah, to
Or
degree.
we reduced the middle class.
Exactly. Yeah, so we reduce the middle class. So it means you have people for whom the whole system doesn't work. So if you have a decently high income job, your super savings are high enough, you know that you have very little housing costs because you own the dwelling. Yes, you pay rates and electricity and whatever, but ultimately your costs, property related, are low. That works just fine. But this chunk of people who are just fine each year as we move along gets a little bit smaller. And at some point, the pension system, they got okay, so we need to put a bit more money in there. And so this system will grow, which then means, okay, so we need to finance this system. So we need to tax you somehow. And the whole federal budget, to a large degree, well over 50%, is income tax. So that means, okay, we need to make sure that we have more income tax in the system. The income tax that we need in the system means that by design, for example, we just keep the tax brackets stable. We don't adjust them to inflation. So we make sure that there is more money coming into the public coffers. That's one way of keeping things running, because we don't want to raise new taxes or do a difficult thing like introducing some sort of wealth tax or death tax. That would be super unpopular politically. So we try to keep the system focused on income tax, which is a big fat nuisance to, well, income tax paying people of working age. And that's problematic. And even the lower income earners pay a reasonably high amount of income tax in an ever more expensive world. So they are being squeezed left, right, and center. That means they can't put anything other than their forced superannuation savings away for retirement. And that further creates the problem. So when I'm looking decades ahead, I think, okay, so sooner or later, we need to do some sort of major structural adjustment to our tax system. I'm not a tax expert. I can't say exactly when this would be the case. I can, from my big demographic perspective, say that I see this to be a very, very popular move because it would mean, the way that I'm reading it, we must take income tax down. That will help a lot for retirement, it will, cost of living pressures, but we must still find money somehow. The budget
Yes.
needs money. And so the question then is, what kind of money would fill this gap of reducing the reliance on income tax? Maybe we create some crazy new mining boom and we say all of this money goes in there. Maybe that is a bit hard to bet on. Yeah? Maybe we then need to find to tax richer people more or fill some sort of gap, some sort of loophole, finally, close that loophole. It's difficult. It's a major, major difficult and most certainly unpopular thing that is ahead for the political class.
Now, clearly you're talking about the future and you're working out how our future is going to pan out. We've often said that demographics is a great crystal ball of the future. This is what you do all day for your clients, isn't it, Simon?
It's exactly what I do all day for my clients. My clients aren't the federal government, at least not yet. So I'm not helping them out with these forecasts, but it is, I'm speaking at conferences, business conferences, board strategic sessions and so forth, where we do just that. We look through the business of the company, through the industry, through the demographic lens. And then we go, well, what does this look like from a future perspective? And part of this is, by the way, a focus on retirement, a focus on workforce management. How do you have a decent staffing pipeline? These are issues that are really, really of big strategic importance for Australian businesses. And yeah, that's how I spent my days.
Well, if you'd be interested in getting Simon to speak to your organization, your company, your presenter to your seminar, then go to the demographics group. I'll leave a link in the show notes and you'll have a chance to see how Simon can help you. Once a year, Simon and I get together with a group of Australian property, tax, finance, estate planning, property development experts, and that's at Wealth Retreat, which we're holding on the Gold Coast at the end of May this year. I'll leave a link in the show notes. Find out about it because it's a great way of, for 5 days, getting away from the rest of the world and spending time creating your future. You're going to come in with a whole lot of thoughts and ideas, but you're going to go out with some firm plans about the next stages of your life. wealthretreat.com.au. And if you're interested in developing financial independence through strategic property investing, if you're wanting to safely outperform the markets, my team at Metropole can help you by putting a plan together, helping you put a strategic plan to safely outperform the markets and grow, protect and pass on your wealth. That's what we do. Go to metropole.com.au. We'd love to help you plan to become the property investor you plan to become and then help implement that plan. Now, Simon, getting back to retirement, is it that people are now going to just slowly become scaling down more than stepping out?
Yes, so I consider this the slide into retirement. So when we think of retirement, we still think of the gold watch retirement, where on a Friday you get the gold watch for 30 years with the company, and then you ride off into the sunset. That's not happening anymore. Much more common it will be to scale back your working hours to 3 days, then to 2 days, maybe in some sort of way you occasionally jump on a project, and then at some point you actually go, wait a second, I'm retired now, aren't I? I haven't worked in quite a bit. So you will kind of miss the boat on your last day of work. That is becoming much more common. It also, of course, has real implications for superannuation funds, who, traditionally speaking, thought of superannuation as you have a phase where you pay into the account, and then from one day to the next, you switch over to the pension phase, and then you draw out of your account. But this will be much more messy now for those poor pension funds, because they will have people draw out money, all the while they still put money in it. So it's a bit
Interesting. Yeah.
messy for them. They'll need to sort this out. That's their job. They're big enough, they're rich enough, they're capable enough to pull this off. But so they need to rethink their portfolio. There's a lot of things happening in the background when you talk to the pension folks, to the superannuation folks, how to mention the pension and the pay-in phase. It's just hilarious to see how a simple change of human behavior, when do I retire, how to retire, it trickles down into all different types of sectors as well.
Never thought about that. So would this actually maybe be healthier for Australia's workforce and our productivity? We know we're going to run out of workers in the future.
Exactly. So, you just hinted at it. My main demographic forecast for the next decades remains that we run out of workers, that the demand for workers grows, all the while the workforce shrinks. Anything that we can do to increase productivity out of the existing worker bees that we have is helpful. So this is AI, automation, robotics. These things are helpful, but we can also try to find ways to encourage people to work until an older age, or maybe to start their careers a bit earlier. And with starting careers earlier, I'm not talking about child labor or anything. I'm talking about, let's not over-educate people. Do we need a worker to have a master's degree? In some sectors we do. Maybe a bachelor's degree is enough. Are there certain kind of people where we require a degree from at the moment that actually could be done through a shorter TAFE level type education? So we need to be a bit more efficient and strategic in our job qualifications there. But it's definitely an important issue to say, let's have a couple more people work longer.
So am I hearing you say we should encourage older Australians to work longer?
I think we should. So the system as a whole benefits from it. I also think as a workforce, you can significantly benefit from having a team that stretches a relatively vast age group, because you get more perspectives in it. And
Yes.
so if you are in a business and a person in their 70s, they would have been through 5 decades of work experience. So they would have seen quite a few cycles of certain kind of developments. And if you are young in your 30s and you live through the first boom and bust cycle, this might be all very exciting and shocking and depressing for you. But if you live through a couple of those, you can kind of hopefully recognize repeat patterns and then be a calming presence of a company. You might even provide the perspective as, I see what you're suggesting here, but this particular thing, it worked really bad or really well when we did this under a slightly different set of circumstances 30 years ago. So that kind of perspective is extremely helpful.
What I'm hearing you say is that there's mental health advantages, general health advantages, I guess, by staying active. Obviously, advantages to the government because people paying more tax. But are there consequences for the younger generations when previous generations stay in the labour force for an extra decade or so?
To a degree, yes. So I'd say if you just want the question answered, is there a job for me to do for the young people? I'd say, don't worry. We'll have plenty of work going around. So don't be concerned about this. But of course, if I am a more senior team member, I would want to retain my more senior position. So that is problematic for, if you look at a hierarchical business where you move up the ranks into the top leadership jobs. If the top leadership never ever retires, what is the motivation for the people in their 40s and 50s to move into the top jobs? So you must kind of figure out, how do we manage this? How do we take a senior leader in a formal employment position to some sort of consulting position on the side? How do we adjust this from a team management perspective? That's very, very tricky. Yes, like, do we want all our politicians to become older and older and older, or should we want to make room in the political system for more young people while still creating maybe some sort of alternative option of a council of elders where you go, well, we don't give you all the decision-making power, but we definitely want your wisdom. So how do we tap into that? And at the moment, the system doesn't allow it. But so I think there is room for experimentation, for innovation, to figure out how can we get more wisdom out of our elderly workers or elderly political leaders.
Well, there's no doubt that there's a lot of experience. But the other thing I think is also perspective, as you say. So I think our chat today has made something crystal clear to me. Retirement's no longer a cliff you step off at 65. It's become a long, gradual slope. For some, the slope leads to freedom, purpose, reinvention. But it seems like, unfortunately, there are going to be a bigger group of Australians who are going to have a struggle, a race to save enough to eventually stop working. So the challenge for policymakers and for Australian families is to ensure this doesn't become a source of inequality. I'd be unhappy to see that happen because it will widen into future generations. Now, if you've enjoyed this, I hope you got some benefit. I'd love you to subscribe to the podcast wherever you're watching or listening to this. And if you're listening to it on an iPhone, click the button that you get automatic downloads. So once a week you get Simon's wisdom. And I also would like to ask you one favor. Just share this with somebody else who you think would get benefit from understanding how demographics is going to shape the future. And our future is changing, but there are some, I guess, guiding thoughts there that give us some direction of which way it's going. So I want to discuss those again with you next week, Simon.
I'll see you next week.
Thank you. This Demographics Decoded podcast has been brought to you by Metropole Property Strategists. We provide a complete range of services to help our clients safely create intergenerational wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. If you're looking to buy an investment property or your next home, why not have a discovery chat with one of our wealth strategists? Just go to metropole.com.au and explore your options. You'll find we're much more than just another buyer's agent. We provide a complete range of services, including property advisory, wealth advisory, home buying, buyer's agency, property management, renovations, and development management services. The team at Metropole will help you with frameworks that I've fine-tuned over 5 decades and we've been helping clients with for well over 25 years. We're big enough to tip the scales in your favour, but still small enough to care. In between these Demographics Decoded shows, you can follow me on social media, and I suggest you also follow Simon Kirstenmacher. You'll find him regularly posting on all social media platforms. And thanks for spending the last little while with Simon and me. I hope you got some benefit from the show. And if you did, and you know somebody who may also benefit, please tell them about Demographics Decoded. There's a share button on every podcast app. I hope you're going to be doing them a favour, and you're definitely going to be doing us a favour, helping us in our quest to make as many people as possible aware of the demographic changes that are going to be shaping their future. And of course, if you don't currently subscribe, we'd love you to. And of course, any of the information that we've been sharing with you is general information because we don't know your specific circumstances.